Picture a city, not a modern one, an ancient one, Rome or medieval London. Now picture the people, tens of thousands of them, packed together behind stone walls. And every single one of them, every single day, needs to poop. There are no flush toilets, no sewers running to a treatment plant, no pipes at all. So where does it all go? We're talking about tons of human waste, every single day, piling up in the middle of a crowded city. The answer to that question shaped where people lived, what they ate, how they died, and it involves a job so disgusting that the men who did it were only allowed to work in the dark. Let's start with the scale, because it's genuinely staggering. One human produces a surprising amount of waste in a year. Multiply that by a city of 50,000 people, with no plumbing, and you have a crisis that never ever stops. Every day. Forever. So what did they do? For most of human history, the first answer was simple and grim. You just went. In a pot, in a pit, in the street, in the river. Early cities were, to put it kindly, filthy. Although, incredibly, a few ancient people cracked this thousands of years before everyone else. In the Indus Valley, in cities like Mohenjo-daro over 4,000 years ago, archaeologists have found private toilets inside individual homes, connected to covered brick drains that ran down the streets. They had a working sanitation system while much of the rest of the world was still squatting in a field. It was so far ahead of its time that, after those cities faded, nothing that sophisticated would appear again for thousands of years. Humanity basically invented decent plumbing, and then somehow forgot all about it. But people aren't stupid, and the smell alone drove them to invent solutions. The most common was the cesspit. You'd dig a deep hole, usually in the cellar or the yard, and that became the household toilet. Everything went down into the pit, where it slowly stewed. And for a while, that works. But a pit fills up, and when it does, someone has to empty it. Enter one of the worst jobs in all of human history. In Tudor England, they were called Gong farmers. Their job was to climb down into the cesspits and privies of the city, by hand, and dig out the accumulated human waste. It was considered so foul that Gong farmers were legally only allowed to work at night, which is why they were also called nightmen. They'd haul the waste out in buckets, load it onto carts, and cart it outside the city walls before dawn. And it was genuinely deadly. Gong farmers were poisoned by the toxic fumes rising off the waste, and there are records of men who fell in and actually drowned in it. For this, they were paid well, because almost nobody else would do it. Now here's the part that flips the whole story. That waste, the night soil, was not just garbage, it was valuable. Human excrement is loaded with nitrogen, exactly what crops need. So the night soil the Gong farmers hauled away wasn't just dumped, it was sold. It went to farms and market gardens outside the city as fertilizer, to grow the food that fed the city that produced the waste in the first place. A perfect, disgusting circle. And in parts of Asia, especially in China and Japan, this went even further. Human waste was a genuine commodity, bought, sold, and even fought over, because a household's poop could be traded to farmers for cash or vegetables. Your waste was quite literally an asset. Not everyone was so organized, though, and this is where history gets truly grim. In much of medieval Europe, the household toilet was a chamber pot, and the disposal method was often to simply open a window and hurl the contents into the street below. In some cities, people would shout a warning first, a slurred version of an old French phrase for watch out for the water, which may be where we get the ancient cry of Gardilou. Castles had stone toilets called garderobes that jutted out over the walls and dropped everything straight into the moat or down the outer stone. And it wasn't only the poor or the medieval. Even the Palace of Versailles, the glittering home of the French kings, was notorious for its stench, because with thousands of courtiers, and almost nowhere proper to go, people simply relieved themselves in corners, in stairwells, and behind the curtains. Gold on the walls, filth on the floor. Of course, some civilizations tried to just make it disappear, and the greatest of them was Rome. Beneath the city ran the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Drain, one of the world's first sewer systems, begun around the 6th century BC. It channeled waste and storm water out of the city and dumped it straight into the river Tiber. It was a marvel of engineering. It was also, for anyone living downstream, an absolute nightmare, because the Roman solution wasn't really to treat the waste. It was just to move the problem into the river and let it float away. And that, right there, is the flaw that would eventually bring a great city to its knees. Because for centuries, the plan for human waste was some combination of bury it in a pit, sell it to a farmer, or throw it in the river. And that works, until a city gets too big. By the 1850s, London had swollen to about 2.5 million people. The old system, cesspits emptied by nightmen and carted to the countryside, simply couldn't keep up. Cesspits overflowed. Waste seeped into the streets and, crucially, into the River Thames, which was also where much of the city drew its drinking water. The result was death on a massive scale. London was hit by wave after wave of cholera, a horrific disease that killed tens of thousands. At the time, most people blamed bad air, a mysterious stink they called miasma. But a physician named John Snow made a discovery that changed the world. Cholera wasn't spreading through the air. It was spreading through water, contaminated with human waste. The poop in the river was, quite literally, killing the city. And then, in the summer of 1858, the problem became impossible to ignore, because the Thames began to smell so unbelievably bad that the event got its own name: the Great Stink. The stench of raw sewage baking in the summer heat was so overpowering that it reached the halls of Parliament, and the politicians, gagging at their own desks, finally decided something had to be done. They hired an engineer named Joseph Bazalgette to build a proper sewer system, a vast network of underground tunnels to carry the waste far away from the city and its water. It's a system London still uses today. That's the moment the modern world of waste really began. The combination of the flush toilet, which was becoming popular around the same time, and Bazalgette's sewers created the setup you know now. You press a handle and the problem vanishes, whisked away through miles of pipe to a treatment plant, where it's actually cleaned. No pit, no nightman, no river of disease. If you love the hidden history buried underneath your everyday life, subscribe, because I go deep on stuff like this every single week. So the next time you flush, and the whole thing disappears in about 4 seconds without a single thought, remember what a genuine miracle that is. For thousands of years, human waste was a daily crisis, a job that killed the men who did it, a commodity people bought and sold, and a river of disease that could bring down a city of millions. You get to simply press a handle and forget it ever existed. Almost no human in history had that luxury. The stuff you flush without thinking was, for nearly everyone who ever lived, one of the biggest problems of their entire lives.